Welcome back to the Wild West Wargamers as we continue our series on the factions of Warcradle Studios' great game, Wild West Exodus. And today we're going to tackle one that's been kind of lurking in the background of all the others, right? If you've watched the rest of the series on Wild West Exodus, they've cropped up over and over again. And today we're finally going to put a spotlight on them, the Hex, or specifically the Dark Council of Hex. One of the great things about Wild West Exodus is its inclusion of cosmic horror, a genre that really came into its own under the writer H.P. Lovecraft, or at least he popularized it. That there are monsters and magic among us, not because of some, wild fantasy stuff, but because our minds are so tiny, we really can't comprehend the reality around us. The Hex is one such creature. We view it as a monster, but actually, it's just a bigger thing than we can understand. What we know as the Hex is a living organism, only somewhat conscious. It has no firm memory of its history, and its only real instinct is survival. What takes this creature to the realm of cosmic horror is that it does not have a corporeal body as we know it. It is a cancer upon reality feeding off of other races, and it is billions of years old. But the Hex isn't trying to consume us in the way we typically view it, right? Eating biological matter or something like that. Instead, it binds with us. Since the Hex is a being without will or purpose or history, when it encounters a sentient race, it essentially hijacks them. The Hex is a being that is a higher level of existence, but it doesn't have a body. But it wants to experience the world like we do, which is not inherently bad at all. Well, we'll see how that turns out to be in just a little bit. And this is all like super wiggity, right? It's out there. It's a sci-fi concept that I absolutely love, but let's walk through how the Hex has shaped things on this alternate Earth, and you'll see exactly what I mean. When the Hex approached our planet, it divided itself into 6 pieces called Tenebrae shards, and it spread all across the planet. The hope is that a sentient race will stumble upon one of these shards. While in the Earth, these shards begin corrupting everything around them. In fact, the Earth immediately around it kind of turns into this weird red liquid, and we'll get to the importance of that in a little bit. As humans began to develop cities and build atop this corrupted ground, the Hex slowly infiltrated our minds, creating a corrupted form of mankind from within. There's a whole side story about an island-dwelling race being wiped out due to Hex corruption, but the real meat of the story has this power influencing the top minds and political leaders of European nations. When the Hex fully corrupts an individual, a lot of things happen. They become stronger, more aware. Their minds become linked with the others who have been corrupted, and it's almost as if the Hex is using mankind to form its own neural network, greedily learning everything it can about us as a species by getting more and more people corrupted inside of it. All this knowledge and skill allows for the corrupted to reach extremely high levels within society, and we're talking scientists, politicians, gang leaders, etc. They then use their influence to corrupt more people, and the cycle continues. And this goes on until the Hex has enveloped the sentience of a given population, like a computer virus spreading from person to person. It's unifying us, but it's also changing us. And there's more. If people come into contact with that strange red goo I mentioned earlier, their bodies go through horrific mutations, becoming all manner of grotesque monster. So that's an overview of what the Hex is trying to do at any given point, but where is it now in the Wild West Exodus universe? Well, as I said, one of the most prominent and successful of these 6 shards has been influencing the top minds of European nations. It's corrupting the best and brightest thinkers, while simultaneously creating a whole new wave of warriors underground through that nasty mutation process. One man who we made particular mention of in the Enlightened video, and also the Civil War one, was named Carpathian, and he was inducted to the Dark Council, the kind of group that leads this shard over in Europe, and he is actually how we know everything about the Hex. He's a prolific scientist, a great thinker, and when he was inducted into the Dark Council, which is, like I said, the ruling party, he discovered a remarkable gift. Carpathian was able to connect with all the other Hex members telepathically, like we mentioned before, but they could not look into his mind. It was a one-way connection. And so his diary about the Hex and the Dark Council is what we see actually in the Wild West Exodus rulebook, explaining their lore basically. It's how we know everything we know about them. What Carpathian discovered was that the Hex wasn't some mystical, magical force, but was in fact an alien life form, and a very complex one at that. It had little to no awareness of its own, and it didn't even see the full potential of its own abilities. That red goo surrounding the shards, sure, the Hex knew it could corrupt living tissue, but it did not know that the same goo could be used to harness a more powerful and compact energy source than mankind had ever seen. It took the scientist from the outside perspective to look at this stuff with a different set of eyes. The people whom the Hex influenced simply didn't have that level of intelligence, right, to experiment with what it was possible to do in those kinds of ways, but Carpathian did. He had all the blessings of the Hex with none of the drawbacks, like his will being taken over or his mind being read. Now, we briefly touched on the arrogance of Carpathian in the Enlightened video, and I wanted to do a dedicated video to him in the future, linking all these different threads together, but we'll keep it really simple here. Carpathian saw the potential of using the alien creature to his advantage, right, the advantage of humanity as a whole, and rather than being the predator, the Hex shard in Europe became a tool. Carpathian stole the shard and much of the miraculous red liquid around it as he could, and he smuggled it away to America. Remember, in our Enlightened video, this is the guy who was selling nastier and nastier weapons to both sides of the American Civil War, trying to carve a nation out for himself. Using the red liquid that the Hex shards produced, Carpathian developed what it's called quote-unquote juiced weapons, a new level of destructive power that was introduced to humanity. And all this might lead you to think that the Hex came to conquer our minds and ultimately became prey for us. That's not really the case though, because all that power and drama that Carpathian wields and creates and represents, it all represents just one of the 6 shards of the Hex. The Dark Council is enraged and seeks to unite with other Hex forces, of which there are some in the United States, particularly deep in the South, feeding amongst the lowest and most forgotten of us. A second Hex shard grows in power. So when we play Wild West Exodus as the Hex, we command the forces both in their fight for survival and also to spread and reclaim the stolen shard, and retake its place as the corrupting influence on humanity. So why is this so cool? What makes the Hex such a cool idea? Well, first of all, I love cosmic horror, right? A creature that lacks substance, but somehow has enough mentality to crave it, right? It's a parasite, but an unwitting one. It doesn't understand the morality of hijacking another species so it can feel things and experience them. It doesn't understand that. It raises a lot of fantastic questions about the idea of consciousness and then what that really means and sovereignty as a species, even if that means destroying ourselves, that kind of stuff. We get to choose. We have the freedom to do whatever we want. Now, one thing I didn't mention here, but that is constantly brought up with the Hex, is the Order. If you don't know, Order is the Order of whatever is another one of the factions in Wild West Exodus, who their sole reason for existing in the lore is they're hunting the Hex. The Hex will come, it'll completely, clean out a planet, total conquering it, but the Order is hot on its tail. It only gets to enjoy fully conquered species for a couple days, and the Order comes and drives it away. They basically burn the planet. They're trying to hunt and kill the Hex, but it's such a tricky thing to try and kill. It keeps slipping away. One of the things that makes it kind of difficult to talk about the Hex, and also some characters like Carpathian, is that their narratives are so deeply interwoven with so many different factions that to explain one, you kind of have to explain them all. And that's kind of the trouble I've been having with the Hex, where yes, it is its own faction, but it's also been instrumental in the creation of the Union because of the way Carpathian stole the material from the Hex to create new weapons, but also in the Covenant of the Enlightened and how that has shaped mankind. And so it's this very interesting thing where an alien life form came and it's being used by mankind to create multiple factions that couldn't have existed in the way they do without its influence and power, and that is deeply fascinating. Anyway, friends, those are my thoughts on the Hex. Tell me, what is your favorite unit from the Hex? Leave in the description down below. And like I said, in these videos, we're going to cover more about individual characters and that kind of stuff later on. This is just for the overview of the factions. So thank you all so much for watching and listening. I look forward to seeing you in my next lore video. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.